Let's see. Cyberpunk. I felt like there was something else I wanted to talk about. Here it is, animation. So I want to talk about 3D animation and 2D cartoons, or specifically 3D animated anime. But I'm not just going to talk about Japanese cartoons. I'm going to talk about some American cartoons as well. That's why I didn't want to specifically say anime. So this is going to start with Attack on Titan Season 4. I'm sure you heard the controversy. People are mad about the CG models and Attack on Titan Season 4, which they only do them for the Titans specifically. And they only do it for, there are a couple of Titans where, I'm just going to say this for anybody who watches Attack on Titans, and any character, any Titan you see that isn't 3D animated means that that character is not going to show up very much in the show. I just wanted to say that, even that, I don't know if that's kind of a spoiler for you guys, but the Colossal Titan the Colossal Titan who is notoriously 3D animated every time he showed up in the first 3 seasons is the only character in the last season that isn't a 3D model, because he very rarely transforms, because if he does, he literally nukes an entire town. So naturally he doesn't want to transform in the middle of the city that he lives in. So essentially, like I said, Titans are the only thing that are CGI. And for the most part, when they're sitting completely still, you can't tell. So you're just like, oh, that's 2D. But once the camera moves and the lighting on the CG model interacts with it in a way that you don't see on a 2D drawing, and when it moves, sometimes they move a little bit faster than 12 frames per second, which is the way the amount of frames 2D animation usually has. Sometimes the 3D models move faster than that, and that's what makes it noticeable. But for the most part, the studio, MAPPA, is doing a really good job mixing 3D and 2D. And there's a weird thing about it is that they are also animating the show called Jujutsu Kaisen, which is being praised for its phenomenal 2D animation. But some of you guys are probably wondering, well, why does Attack on Titan have 3D animation in it if they're really good at 2D animation, as shown with Jujutsu Kaisen? Well, one, they were likely working on them at the same time, and they have a really large studio. Their studio actually grew exponentially within the past few years. And because of that, more people, they have more people to put on different projects. Secondly, they had far less time to work on Attack on Titan than they did Jujutsu Kaisen. With that time constraint, the fastest way they knew how to work was, if you make a 3D model, you don't have to draw it over and over again. You make the model once and you reuse it. And
just move it around.
That's much faster and efficient than redrawing it over and over again. So don't blame them. Blame whoever put that time constraint on them. And despite the time constraint, it still looks amazing. So if they had more time, it would look even better. They're also going to be animating this manga that I mentioned before that you think is ridiculous, Chainsaw Man.
Oh God, Chainsaw Man.
And I want you to watch it when it comes out. It's phenomenal. This is probably going to be a few years from now, but Chainsaw Man anime, it's happening. Chainsaw Man is great.
So stupid.
It's ridiculous, but I love it. They also make an anime called Dorohedoro, which came out on Netflix, which is completely 3D animated. But it actually looks really good. And I want to talk about why some 3D animated things look good while others don't. But the best example of one that looks really, really good is Beastars by Studio Orange, that is also on Netflix. The first season. Second season's coming out it's currently airing in Japan, but it won't be out on Netflix until July, which is trash. And I can't find anywhere to watch like a subbed version of it, and that sucks. And the crazy thing is, they actually completely changed the art style from the way that it looks in a manga. But despite that, it still looks great. And sometimes your mind doesn't even recognize that it's 3D. Because Studio Orange is probably the best studio when it comes to making 3D anime and having them look 2D. And taking advantage of the things that 3D can do in comparison to 2D, which is it allows for camera movements that you sometimes will see in 2D, but very rarely, because it requires some very advanced animating, and it's hard to do. Another, Western example is The Dragon Prince. Despite it being 3D, your mind doesn't even think about the fact that it's 3D. because.
My mom thought about the fact that it was 3D. I'm not gonna lie. That was like all I thought about the entire time I was watching.
But for me, the
I was like,
reason
this is
why
3D.
these things use, yeah, these things use 3D animation is because they have unique art styles. Which what I meant, Dorohedoro, Beastars, Dragon Prince. They all are so different from most of their 2D counterparts that when you do them in 3D, it doesn't look off. Unlike with most anime, which the characters they have spike hair, big eyes, and just like a couple lines to represent the nose or the mouth. And even though the art styles are different, they are still kind of uniform. You know what I mean? How when somebody draws something in an anime style, you recognize it as being inspired by anime or potentially being something that will become an anime. Um, and because of that uniformity, whenever you see that style in 3D, you recognize something off about it because you're used to seeing it in 2D. Your mind,
Right.
your mind is just like, ew, this looks weird. I'm used to seeing this in 2D. For me, I believe that technology will eventually get to the point where a 3D animation that's meant to mimic 2D will be indistinguishable. You won't be able to tell the difference. Like eventually, I think they'll be able to make 3D models that look and move just like 2D animation, and you will not notice, and unless somebody tells you, and even then, you probably still won't notice because that's just how technology works. It evolves, and eventually that'll happen. Video games, surprisingly enough, video games actually do it better than anime. There's a game, well, Studio Arc System Works. They make a game called Guilty Gear, but they also made Dragon Ball Fighters. And they, before they did 3D, all of the Guilty Gear games were 2D sprites. So when they made the shift to 3D, they still wanted the characters to look 2D, like they were hand drawn. And they succeed at that even better than Beastars. They sometimes you can't even tell it's 3D until the camera, which it's a 2D fighter, so the camera very rarely goes around them. But when they do like their special move or something like that, the camera goes around them, and that is the only time you notice that it's 3D.